Hello everybody, welcome to another video. Today is the 8th of July, and today we're going to be talking about the front line, but I already did make a video about the Bakhmut sector and especially about Klishivka, and so if you haven't already watched that video, in this video I'm going to be talking more about Zaporizhzhia and Luhansk, and we're going to be going over the events that occurred really over the past few days because I haven't been active for the past few days. And so let's begin with Pyatykhatky, where at this point the Ukrainians do have a pretty solid control over the town, and they have been able to send their forward assault detachments into the town itself, entrenching themselves there. And now they're pushing in the direction of Zherebianki, which is under Russian control at the moment, and it is the next target that Ukraine aims to take over. And so there have been reports popping up from the 7th of July of Ukrainian assault detachments beginning to attack in the direction of this town. And in this direction, you have the 19th Motor Rifle Division and specifically the 429th Regiments. And so the Ukrainian forces have been unable to break through and take over this town yet, but it is certainly a target of theirs. Now, let's move on to the situation around Velyka Novosilka and that entire salient. And so in this sector, starting around July 5th, you had the renewal of battles that were raging to the west of the town of Storomayorske, where you had Ukrainian forces that were entrenched in the different tree lines and forest plantations to the northwest of Storomayorske, and were trying to push from the northwest into the town of Storomayorske itself. There was also battles in Urozhenie, and those are still raging at the moment with no change. The Russians still in control of most of the town, although parts of it are a gray zone, especially in the northern part of Urozhenie. And so by the noon of July 6th, the Russians began launching another round of airstrikes and artillery strikes. And this barrage was mainly targeted at Ukrainian formations to the northwest of Storomayorske. And the units that were hit hardest by these attacks by the Russians on the 6th include the 128th Territorial Defense Brigade, which is located somewhere over here. I'm gonna look for it because I know it's around here. There we go. This unit, Dnipro City Defense Brigade, and also the 35th Marine Brigade. 35th Marine Brigade is also located in this general area. And as a result, both units, they suffered pretty heavy losses, and as a result, they have been reinforced by additional Ukrainian units that are operating in the area around the town of Velyka Novosilka, and that includes the first Tank Brigade, which I thought that it was around the Donetsk axis, and so this is the first time that I'm really hearing of it being around Zaporizhzhia, so that's pretty interesting. But apparently, they have sent some detachments forward to the forest plantations. And additionally, you have reinforcements from the 31st Brigade and 36th Brigade that are moving into the Rivnopil area. So here you have 31st and 36th is also around here somewhere. There we go. And so by the noon of the 7th, the Russians actually tried to conduct their own counterattack to regain the positions that they had lost to the northwest of Storomayorsk, because there are some important bush lines in this area that Ukrainians have tried fortifying themselves in. And so, in terms of Russia's gains in this area, they were able to take back some of the fields that are around Storomayorsk, but they have not been able to totally dislodge the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians in this area have been able to hold on to some key fortifications, key positions that they have been trying to build up for the past few weeks, such as the one that I'm marking with the square, and there's a few others in this area that are currently being fortified. And so the Ukrainians are continuing to build them up. And at the same time, the Ukrainians are moving in new units that were never had any sort of experience on the front line, and they're being moved into the Velyka Novosilka axis. So, as an example, we have the 38th Separate Marine Brigade. This unit has never had combat experience, to my knowledge. They were stationed in Mykolaiv for a while, and now they have been moved to the town of Komar, which is a local supply hub where a lot of the heavy weaponry passes through before it gets spread out across these different highways that stick out from here. And so one of those roads makes its way to Velyka Novosilka. And so in the coming days, you're going to see the 38th Brigade begin to send some of its units in that direction to begin engaging in the hostilities and to fill up the ranks and make up for the Ukrainian losses since the beginning of the counteroffensive. Additionally, you have the 31st and 36th Brigades, as I mentioned previously, and they are attempting to launch assaults onto Pyatykhatky directly from two different directions. And the Russian unit that's defending Pyatykhatky is the 42nd Guards Motor Rifle Division, but it's also aided by the 331st Guards Airborne Regiment, which is also located in the area. And so the Ukrainian attacks in this direction. One of them comes from Rivnopil, where you have a high amount of Ukrainian troops concentrated ever since they took the town, and they're trying to push the Russians out of their forward positions along this low, elevated valley sort of terrain, and then just push to attack Pyatykhatky directly. And so that's where some of the fighting is going on. And then there's also fighting going on around Lvadne, with the Ukrainians trying to push towards the east and flank the Russian positions over there. And so you have these two different directions. The Russians are still holding out, but the Ukrainians are intensifying their assaults. And they're being aided by the artillery strikes from the 72nd Mechanized Brigade, which is over here. It's in Vuhledar, but they sent one of their artillery battalions, I believe, to the Velyka Novosilka axis to assist with the counteroffensive. Now, let's go on to the situation in Luhansk, where it is hard to gauge specific gains made by either side, but I could talk about the general movements and the general activities of both sides. And so, as one example, around Bilohorivka, the Ukrainians, and specifically the 81st Air Mobile Brigade, aided by the 42nd Brigade, which is another one of these new units that was formed this year, 42nd Mechanized Brigade, they began launching attacks from the Ukrainian forward positions in the northern part of Bilohorivka in the direction of Shipilivka, but there has been no recorded success just yet. It's just sort of gauging the activities of both sides, in that now the Ukrainians are in more of a offensive mindset in this specific sector. And this comes after the Russians took over the water filtration plant a bit to the south, in the southeastern corner of Bilohorivka, which gives them some new forward positions to fire onto the Ukrainians. But nonetheless, the Ukrainians are conducting some of their own attacks in that area. Now, moving up to the north, you have in the Dubrova sector, the Ukrainians trying to flank Dubrova from the south, trying to send some small assault detachments from the 95th Air Assault Brigade, which is one of Ukraine's best air assault units. It is renowned for its expertise and for its combat effectiveness. And so they are attacking in the direction of Dubrova from the south. So far, I can't really report about any breakthroughs or any sort of success. This is just a general attack in that direction. And here is the 95th Brigade located over here. Now, a bit to the north, you have the Ukrainian 66th Mechanized Brigade, which is another one of these newer units that was formed by the Ukrainians, has more Western weaponry and training. And so they are beginning to conduct offensive activities, not on any sort of major scale, but this is just a general trend that we've been noticing. And their offensive activities are aimed in the direction of the town of Krasnoyarzysk, which is a town that runs along the Svatove Valley, this valley over here. So it's on a very low elevation, that town. And it's also it also runs around a key road connecting to Kreminna. And so, in theory, the Ukrainian goal, if they were successful, which it seems like they're not going to embark on any sort of major operation in this area in the near future, but it would be to reach the highway to the west of Svatove and then cut off supplies from there into Kreminna, and then from there actually reach Krasnoyarzysk itself and take that over. And they'd be able to do that by setting up positions in some of the high grounds to the west of that town and firing onto the valley, which would be very hard to defend. And so that would, first of all, flank Svatove. It would allow the Ukrainians to flank Svatove. And this is, again, very long-term outlook, and also cut off supplies to Kreminna from the northern side. So that would be their thinking. But there's also rumors that I've seen, I can't substantiate anything, that the Russians are trying to go on the offensive for themselves and secure the town of Nevsky. So we're gonna have to see how that unfolds. And finally, we do have movement in the town of Novoselivske, which is a town that was retaken by the Ukrainians, I believe January, February, around that time, and the Russians regrouped around Kuzhimivka. And so now the Russians are back on the attack in this area. They've been able to take one block of houses, or what remains of those houses. That's to the in the most eastern part of Novoselivske, the parts to the east of the rail line. So they took that part over. It's probably a gray zone beforehand. And then they secured the train station of Novoselivske. Not in operation, obviously, but there is a ammo depot in that area. And they crossed over the highway running through the town and took over the first line of blocks in the western side of the town over here. And so they already have a foothold within the town again. So fighting is raging in that sector. And at the same time, the Russians are trying to flank the Ukrainian positions in this town from the south. They have been able to take over a specific bush line that's to the south, and they're attacking towards another bush line over here. You can see the one that I'm going over with this red line. And so they're again trying to maneuver from the south as well as they're attacking from the eastern direction. And again, this is not any sort of major offensive. At most, it's going to take over Novoselivske. If not, then it will just probably divert Ukrainian resources toward that sector instead of them focusing on defending against Russian attacks on Kupiansk or fighting in Kreminna or the different sectors that we talked about on the Luhansk front that the Ukrainians are trying to attack right now. So that's the entire Russian objective over there. And so that's all I have for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.